For well over a century, the hot dog has been the quintessential, dirt-cheap, flavorful, all-American meal, a kind of meaty blank slate you can slather your regional preferences onto, like slaw, chili, relish, or onions. But can a person who cares about what they're eating and the impact their food has on the environment and animals and meatpacking workers eat a hot dog in good conscience? How about 4 or 5 hot dogs every day? In this episode, we speak to the writer who did just that, all to tell us the story, good, bad, and ugly, of this handheld feast. I'm Jerusha Klemperer, and this is What You're Eating, a project of foodprint.org. We aim to help you understand how your food gets to your plate and to see the full impact of the food system on animals, planet, and people. We uncover the problems with the industrial food system and offer examples of more sustainable practices, as well as practical advice for how you can help support a better system through the food that you buy and the system changes you push for. I'm here with Jamie Loftus, who is a comedian, a podcaster, and an author of a book that's still pretty recent. I might be a little behind the curve here, but a recent book called Raw Dog: The Naked Truth About Hot Dogs. And I love that you describe yourself in the book as a hot dog reporter with nothing to lose.
There's only so many of us.
That's the thing. I was like, are there hot dog reporters with something to lose?
There's one guy named Bruce. I think that he would have something to lose, but only because he's been at it way longer than I have. All I have to lose is my, I think actually now what I do have to lose is my friendships in the professional eating community.
Okay. So you set out during that first COVID summer that we could all be out in the world again, 2021, traveled around the country, hitting the best hot dog joints in town and maybe some of less best. And everything from baseball stadiums to the Coney Island hot dog eating contest. So what made you want to write a book about hot dogs, or this particular book about hot dogs?
There has been a lot of writing about hot dogs. Well, I think at this point I've read it, most of it. But the reason I wanted to write this book is because I had never seen hot dogs written about in the way that I wanted to read about them, where what I was finding was well written and well done, but it was either about how hot dogs are great and here's a list of them that are delicious, or it was the exact opposite and like why hot dogs are a pestilence to the earth and not a source of joy. And I think that there are, it's so funny because it's like I weirdly feel like I come off as like we need bipartisanship in the hot dog discussion community, which is not generally my vibe, I promise. But I wanted to have those discussions happening alongside each other, and I hadn't seen that anywhere before. And I was coming out of making a series of podcasts about hyper-specific issues, and was the first topic I was rejected on was hot dogs, where they were like, okay, you've pushed your luck one too many times. Please choose some, please be serious. And so I took the idea instead to a publisher, and I think it was a really cool match. I loved my editor, Allie, so much. And we got to kind of like build out a book that didn't exist yet, which I didn't know still could happen.
Yes, it felt unique in that way, for sure. And, making a podcast like this, my friends are constantly bemoaning that I'm ruining certain foods for them. One of my friends pleaded with me, like, please don't come for peanut butter and jelly. I need it. And probably most meat eaters would feel that way about hot dogs, right? They don't want to know how they're made, and they don't want to have to give them up because they bring joy to a lot of people, as you said. Thanks to you, I watched a YouTube video, How It's Made, Hot Dogs.
Oh, boy.
Can't say that I
Sorry about that.
recommend it, but for the listeners, if you want, you can check it out. It reveals the technical mechanics, a few of which were surprising to me. But can you start with the basics, since, you're an expert now? What constitutes a hot dog? What is it? What's in it? How's it made? And I know you have opinions, too, about sort of the preparation after, what it's served in with, et cetera. What's a hot dog?
Yes. Ooh, wow. A complicated, deceptively complicated question. So a hot dog, as far as I'm concerned, is it's not it is a sandwich. It's not a sausage. A sausage is slightly different. There is, a less fine grind to the meat. It is more processed. You tend to, if you're, having a classic hot dog, it doesn't cost a lot of money. The ingredients that are inside of it can vary pretty significantly and still be a hot dog. You've got chicken, pork, turkey, beef, and vegan and vegetarian options. These all fall under the beautiful umbrella that is hot dog. But it is a, finely processed and cured meat in ways that in the book I get into ways that are often diabolical, the ways in which they become affordable. But as far as a hot dog goes, a hot dog is not a sausage. It is a sandwich. And I think that there is a hot dog for everyone that can feel and taste good. That is my mission. That is my word to spread.
Yeah. By the way, that was one of the revelations for me from How It's Made Hot Dogs, or whatever the title of that is, was the chicken. That even when you're eating like a beef dog or a pork dog or whatever, like there's chicken in there.
There's almost always chicken in there. And there's also, this is like most popular in like the DC Baltimore area, but there's also like half and half. There's a lot of like half pork, half beef dogs, or half beef, half chicken dogs. And the taste, it took a while for me to have to like train significantly tasting the difference, because there is also a sameness to a lot of hot dogs. Which I think is kind of what can make it a very comforting dish. But almost any kind of meat can be a hot dog. I've seen it pushed to the limits of octopus, which I'm tempted to reject, but I've seen others accept. Carrot dogs. I feel like that, like a roasted carrot dog in a hot dog bun. Ooh. Really, really beautiful stuff. Has nothing to do with hot dogs, but spiritually is. There's all these exceptions.
Absolutely. Well, your book touches on many of the problematic aspects of industrial meat production, some of which were really highlighted during those early months of the COVID pandemic. Can you talk us through what you learned about meatpacking plants and slaughterhouses and meat companies during that time? What came to light?
So there was a lot of really thoughtful reporting that it was really interesting as I was writing this in the back half of 2021 into early 2022 to reflect on a time that I think many people memory holds a little bit. And going back to, like, I clearly remember in, April 2020, then President Trump making an executive order that meatpacking factories were going to stay open because meat is important to Americans and blah, blah, blah. And there's just this really broad nationalistic talk. I remember seeing the wave of press of like, here's why that could be extremely dangerous, not only from the myriad animal rights issues that already exist in these plants, but the labor issues, which is something I knew less about. I was fairly well versed in what the harms and the violations towards animals were in these processes, but I didn't know how the employees were treated alongside those processes. And so I remembered that, and then I kind of didn't remember hearing about it again because there were 40 million things that were going wrong, and I feel like that story kind of flew under the radar if you weren't actively keeping up on it. But there was, at meat processing plants across the U.S., there was, I think at one point it was the second most dangerous job in the U.S. to have, with a number of fatalities, behind working in a hospital. It was the most dangerous job that you could be doing. From a labor perspective, I got the chance to kind of go back and see how jobs in meatpacking in mid-century were far more secure because the unions were secure. But the unions weakened over time, partially because of new laws being passed that, slowly but surely chipped away at them, and also because of the unions' failures to keep up with overcoming language barriers and understanding who they were serving. And so by the time 2020 came around, the unions are significantly weakened. The unions often are not able to communicate with migrant workers who are working within these factories, and the factories themselves are working with the government in a way that, and this reporting didn't come out until I think early 2022, and I had to go back when this ProPublica report came out and be like, okay, this, I'm very grateful it was released before the book came out, because there was later, unsurprising but damning evidence that the Trump administration basically gave the meatpacking industry carte blanche. There are internal memos where, meatpacking executives at Tyson are essentially drafting the executive order that we end up hearing in April 2020. It couldn't be a more nakedly capitalistic endeavor. And then communication from the top down within these meatpacking companies that are basically just like, it's okay if you don't require people who have tested positive for COVID to stay home. They still have to come into work. And that resulted in a number of deaths. And as the frustrating thing is, even though this reporting was done, it hasn't really moved the needle very much in what the day-to-day at a meatpacking factory is, even post-vaccine. So sorry, that was long-winded, but I was shocked and frustrated that, I knew about this story, but so much continued to happen, and the national conversation had shifted in all these other directions and away from really vulnerable workers who needed and deserved our attention.
Well, and it's one of the many stories about industrial meat that I certainly feel, as a person trying to get this story out there, you have to tell again and again and again. And there are little, you got like Upton Sinclair, and it's all the way to you, to the present. And it's a story that you just have to keep waving the flag.
Mm-hmm. I had this sort of like, possibly delusion of grandeur where I was like, oh, I want to go, work in a meatpacking plant and do some on-site reporting. But that even now you can't even really do that now because of how ag laws are limiting the ability to even carry information from within to without. And I don't know. Yeah, that whole, several weeks I was working on that chapter were, as you know, because you've been waving the flag, it just so discouraging to see how things have arguably regressed in the last 100 years.
Yep. And that wasn't the only labor issue you discovered or touched on in the book. You really laid it out very well that repeatedly throughout your journey, you kept encountering signs in various hot dog establishments that you visited that said, basically, sorry for the slow service, or, sorry for limited seating, or sorry for this, that, or the other. It's just nobody wants to work. And you rightfully call that out. Can you talk about those signs and what was going on that summer?
Yeah. It was an interesting, for a lot of reasons, it was an interesting summer to be traveling, because there was this feeling of like, is this okay? Can we even do this? And as we were going across the country, going to, majority, like something I genuinely love about the hot dog expanded universe is that unlike most popular American foods, it hasn't really been food chained to death. There's not a lot of chains that are associated with hot dogs. So you can go on a trip where you are mostly visiting small businesses where maybe there's 2 or 3 locations, but usually not even that. So it was interesting to get like a specific taste of how each location was dealing with what was not then called, but is now called the Great Resignation. in mid 2021, which was powered by younger working class workers who, throughout the pandemic, realized that they were getting better benefits and a more secure living on unemployment than they were going to low-wage jobs where they felt that they were not being treated well. They weren't being paid adequately and were being exploited. And so by the summer of 2021, when the vaccine rolled out and many people were encouraged to return to work, many didn't, because they were like, of all of the major social safety net failures that were laid bare throughout lockdown, there were young workers that were like, I refuse to be treated this poorly. I'm not going to go back. I'm going to find another way to make a living. And so what that came out with, in which the tricky balance there is, I completely understand how a small business owner is really hurt by that and how that does make it harder to run your business. But the tone of that would often be angry towards the workers rather than angry towards the system that brought this very valid and I think radical realization out in the workers. Because everyone's just trying to get through the day to day. So they're like, no, I'm mad at the 22-year-old. I'm not mad at the system oppressing the 22-year-old. And I was sort of seeing that again and again throughout the summer.
Well, and it also touches on this issue that comes up on our podcast a lot, which is around the true cost of food, right? So you mentioned at the beginning, a hot dog is cheap, or it should be. But part of the issue, right, is when we talk about what happens at the plants, whether it's to the animals or to the workers, when we talk about how much a small business owner is able to pay their young hourly employee, it's got to be really little all along the chain to get to a place where at the end you have a meal that can cost $2 or whatever it is.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And so that's I was hoping, ideally, hopefully did balance in the book that to not make out small business owners to be the villain of this story. It's not them. It's certainly not them. And it's not necessarily a small business owner's fault that they are not able to pay their employees more. But it's if that is the issue, what is the step above that? What is the step above that? And it comes down to our small businesses are not being supported enough. If you can't pay your, it's the only way to be a successful business is to not pay a living wage, then you're not a successful business.
I think you succeeded in that. There was a lot of nuance in your critiques and also a lot of hands up at the air, kind of gesturing around at our crazy world. How did we get here?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, at some points it's it's frustrating because I very much wanted to write about these labor issues. But then when it comes to, I don't know, when I read a lot of nonfiction, and the last chapter is always to any nonfiction book about anything, the last chapter is and here's the call to action, and here's what we do, and here's step one to making a better world. And I just could not find it in me to write that chapter because I'm I don't know. It's to some extent, I feel the talking about it is the step that I would hope that people take, because it's, I don't know. I mean, speaking to your show about finding more ethical ways to enjoy this dish, which I do believe is possible, whether you're a meat eater or not. There are ways, and I've been, encouraged by small business owners I've talked to who are passionate about that same issue.
Oh, one other labor issue that I just recently read a piece that was sort of unearthing all of this prison labor in the food chain. And actually a major hot dog brand was implicated in that as using prison labor. And I was like, oh my God, we'll just add one more labor issue.
Wow. I have not seen, I'm
send you a
not
link.
Surprised, but please. Yes. I was I bet is it Tyson? Is it Smithfield? It's always one of those two sickos.
That's not the name they use, but maybe they own this brand.
They own them all. I always think about, I think the most effective, although it was fairly censored, the most effective, at least within subcategory hot dogs, protest against the practices within the the meatpacking industry was in 2022 at the Nathan's Hot Dog Contest, where you have the Darth Vader protester coming out holding a sign saying like kill the Smithfield Death Star. And he got cut away from, but I support him. I support his fight. I thought that was like one of the coolest things I've ever seen on TV ever.
I love it. Okay, so you correctly call the hot dog deeply American, and the book really is an exploration of American culture and history and kind of where hot dogs have intersected with those issues and with some of the really important moments in recent and, further back history. They're inextricably woven into the fabric of this country and into all of this country's problems. And you really touch on that, labor issues, as we've discussed, animal welfare issues, environmental issues, racism. We've talked about labor. What are some of the other unsavory truths that people might not know about hot dogs?
One of the issues I really was hoping to get into, and there was way more than I even imagined, was because I wanted to understand the production of a hot dog. I wanted to understand how it gets, like, what about it made it American, and I really loved and was simultaneously frustrated by the marketing story behind the hot dog, because the answer about like what makes a hot dog American, nothing, basically nothing, but like it is not rooted in any food traditions indigenous to here. It is not very American at all. What I think really makes it American is the fact that it is a huge success of marketing, which feels like a very American thing. And I like going in early, one of the most helpful books I read was called Hot Dog by Bruce Craig, who is the hot dog writer with Something to Lose. And he did a great, brief history of how the hot dog sort of became the, all of the various myths around how the hot dog was created. And as I was going through them, it just reminded me so much of how like tech moguls sound when they talk about like, it was just me in a garage with a dream. And then you hear, like you read whatever, the Walter Isaacson book that comes out about those same guys 20 years later. And it's like, well, it was actually like, $5 million investment from their parent. And really this other guy did it. And there was actually really 30 people and there was never a garage. And this guy was mean. Like, all the origin stories that you hear also apply to hot dogs where, there are all these stories that are so goofy. And I understand why they were successful because they're really potent, it's like really potent, the American dream narrative of like one day a vendor was at a baseball game holding a sausage in a glove and thought, surely there's a better way to deposit this meat tube to the masses. And it's ridiculous, and they've all been debunked. But I think that that's really interesting where it was, and because it became popular in the early 20th century, as there was such a huge wave of immigration to the U.S., and this selling this dream was very important, that the hot dog kind of fit very cleanly into that narrative of like, here is like one ingenious person who made this happen, and now look at them. It's actually really great that they own a hot dog conglomerate because they deserve it, because the time they had a sausage in a glove. And it's has like the hot dog story has all the hallmarks of things that feel more immediately pernicious and scary, but it's a hot dog. It's silly. It's silly that all of these like capitalistic rules also apply to hot dogs, but is true.
Well, and then they become this, they are not, let's say, in origin American, but then they become this like blank slate for every region, city, peoples, whatever, to turn them into their own regionally specific thing, which is very American, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I really love about the hot dog is, as I was traveling, you could feel the food traditions of wherever you are generally projected onto their signature hot dog, where I live in the Southwest. I love an Arizona hot dog. where you got like a really good grilled bun. You've got there's like almost like a mayonnaise like structure. You've got it split. It's incredible. Then you have novelty hot dogs where they're like throwing SpaghettiOs on it. They're throwing onion rings on it. It's kind of a mess, but it's fun. There's ideas. You got hot dogs in the South where you get really deep into like specific chili recipes. And I really enjoyed that. I wish they toasted their buns, but we'll like circle back to that later. And then you have like most famously, you have the Chicago dog, and that I have taken a lot of flack. I got booed at my own book release show in Chicago for being, I deserved it. Like I came down too hard on the Chicago hot dog. It's not for me, but it is certainly distinct. And then I think one of my favorite hot dogs in the East, you've got like red snappers in Maine, which are a little weird to me, if I'm being honest. But the in Baltimore, there's this incredible hot dog that is just like, I feel like really embodies what the original purpose with a hot dog was, which is to be cheap and be filling. And it is a lightly fried hot dog that is wrapped in lightly fried bologna. And if you have like 2 bites of it, and like, I don't need to eat for 6 weeks. So I don't know. It's cool seeing like, the bougie hot dogs versus the clearly utilitarian hot dogs, and the stands versus the brick and mortars, and all the best hot dogs places I went to had burned down at least once. That is like the hallmark of whether they're any good. So that's the fun part. Yeah.
I mean, you said you'll eat 2 bites and then you don't have to eat any more again, but we all know you ate like 4 other dogs that day.
For sure. For sure. Yeah.
I mean, the sheer volume.
It was health-wise not my summer. I had to kind of detox after that summer.
Well, speaking of volume eating, you devote a decent amount of time to the Coney Island hot dog eating contest, which I was very happy to see. You get into its history, including a seminal contest in the summer of 2007 when Joey Chestnut first beat Kobayashi. And I just have to jump in here to say that my whole body went electric when I got to this part, because I was at the 2007 contest and I was a hot dog counter for one of the contestants. And as you're describing...
Do you remember who?
Yes, Hall
That's
Hunt.
So cool. Oh, I don't know him. That's so cool.
He only ate like 20-something hot dogs, so he was insignificant that day. But I stood...
Who can blame him?
I stood... It was the craziest day. And just hearing you recount it, as history was totally thrilling. I was like, that did happen. I was there. And Kobayashi did throw up. And then swallow it again.
Eat it.
Chestnut comes back into the lead. Kobayashi falls to second. They're both now over the
Kobayashi
record.
pausing now.
40
Kobayashi
seconds.
pausing now. 39 seconds remain. This would be the greatest moment in the history of American sports if Chestnut can bring the belt home to Coney Island. It's been gone for 9 years.
Truly, history is everywhere. I'm so jealous. I wish, God, what would I give to see Kobayashi eat the vomit? Like, so awesome. Congratulations on having been there. That rocks. That's so cool.
Something happened to me that day, which was that I was really interested in Americana and kitsch and sort of where food intersects with all of those. And I was like, this is going to be the greatest day of my life. I cannot wait. I was like, how hilarious is it that these people eat 1 million hot dogs? And I have to say, I was kind of traumatized because the excess of it, the insanity of, at the top, they made this announcement, like, we've donated 4,000 hot dogs or however many it was.
To public schools, yeah.
To public schools to feed hungry children.
And, you're just like,
then they
seems
proceed
like a
to
lateral
just
move. They're
yes. Like we're just going to, and then we're just going to eat so many that we have to throw up, but then we'll swallow it again and, nearly win the contest. I was just like having so many feelings of like repulsion and whatever. And, you do a great job of recording that as well. Your kind of revulsion at what you were seeing, but also you fell in love with Joey Chestnut that day, so it couldn't have been 100% revulsion.
I fully did fall in love with him. And now, 2 years on, we'll see, 2024, I've got high. I am like now a fan of it too, where it's like I have to like compartmentalize a lot of my personal beliefs to engage with it. But I love the contest so much. I think, and I may have seen Joey at the peak of his career, 76. He is not hitting those numbers the last 2 years. And it's because he shouldn't be able to. That was a game-changing day. I always knew that was like something that I needed to do in order to properly get the book done. But it was just, I mean, the excess of it is extremely alarming. The energy around the contest is slightly menacing, but at the same time, I feel like I look at how that contest is often portrayed in larger media and in international media, and the takeaway is like, Americans are disgusting. And then I feel like this knee-jerk, like, wait a second, those are some really nice people eating 50 hot dogs. And so I wanted to, and I was lucky that last year I went back when I was doing my book tour last spring. The book came out in May, and then the contest is in July. I had a number of professional eaters who came on stage at events with me, and we would talk about it. And I learned a lot about how people get into it, and ended up writing a story about 2 eaters that I really love that have these amazing personal stories where I think it's like it's like the two things are true, where it is like the excess is alarming and scary. And also I think it is like tied into like this, I don't know, revulsion with Americans across the board, when it's like there are like really cool women competing in this contest. There are people who are not originally from America that are coming to this contest. And I mean, that's the Kobayashi story, and how internally eaters are working to make it a more inclusive place to do something objectively disgusting. And I think that like all the shades of gray in there are very, very interesting to me.
And I really learned a lot reading about that history. I had sort of frankly stopped paying attention to the contest after that. And I didn't realize, for example, that they started competing, the men and women, separately, and sort of the kind of xenophobic narrative that the contest organizers had kind of pushed around that Kobayashi Chestnut rivalry. I learned so much. I'm sure there are many differences between us, but one of them is that I could not bring myself to eat the free hot dog in the VIP section after the contest, and you could.
I felt like, why are we here? Why are we here if I'm not eating the dog? And it was not good. It was brutal. It was cold.
You're like, I am a connoisseur at this point, and I know that this one is.
It was a cold.
This is bad.
It was a cold dog. Yeah, it was bad.
Not okay. Well, and this really sums up. In the book, you seem to be both disgusted by hot dogs and then truly in love with them. You eat 4 or 5 of them a day for a lot of those days. But what I want to know is, and this is what everyone here wants to know, because now we've maybe borderline ruined hot dogs for them, just as I promised I wouldn't do. How do you know everything you know and keep eating hot dogs? I'm assuming you are still eating hot dogs.
I am, not with as great frequency, but I am still eating hot dogs. I wish that I had a better answer to this. I was sort of assuming when I started writing this book that by the time it came out, I would not be eating hot dogs and I would not be eating meat at all. And I was hoping that would be the case, and it did not. I mean, partially due to a lack of discipline on my part, but it didn't end up going that way. And I was kind of like frustrated and kind of like ashamed that had not come to pass. And the closest I can get to understanding it is the fact that the marketing really worked on me, and untraining that. I mean, has been kind of a mother. Like it hasn't really happened. And I talk about this a little bit in the book, but just like coming from a like lower middle class family where like hot dogs are a very, very viable option, and just all of the memories I have attached to them from being a kid, and the potency that food has to make you comfortable, which I found, and then going back to Trump issuing that horrific executive order in 2020, that is something that is preyed upon of like, well, you need this because you grew up with this. And I've found it, and across like a lot of work I've done, that you can have all of the answers and still, it's almost like a weirdly torturous thing where like I have all of the information and yet I am still eating the hot dog. What is that? And I don't really have a great answer for it, but I know that it is way harder than I ever could have expected.
Yeah. Okay. So the book is hilarious. It's laugh out loud funny, which I rarely laugh out loud when I'm reading a book, but I did. But at the same time, there's something sad hanging over the whole endeavor. There's the specter of COVID. There's your dad's cancer. There's the police state. There's racism. There's your failing relationship, which you tell us right up front. You're traveling with your boyfriend, that relationship will be over by the time the book is over. And then it just made me think, is there also something sad hanging over the enjoyment of any hot dog?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think that a hot dog, or at least as I've seen it, I originally had a chapter about hot dogs as they've been presented in TV and movies. And I do think that there's something very melancholy and contemplative about a hot dog. It is a meal for one. And like you cannot share it really with, and if you do, I don't know, it's a little gross. It gets pretty spitty. Yeah, I think that there is, because like the issues that surround any low cost food, there's all of these moral quandaries that if you want to fully interact with a Costco hot dog, which is delicious, it's challenging to just fully endorse it. Like I couldn't do it. And I don't know. As someone that's eaten a lot of hot dogs alone, I can say that there's a real melancholy about the hot dog's aura, but I love her. I'm rooting for her.
Something you do deliver at the end of the book is like, okay, I know what the people want. The people want the list of the best hot dogs, which, if people want to know that, they should go buy your book. Rather than like those places, can you just describe what is the perfect hot dog? What's there? What did you love about those? I think it was 5 places you called out at the end.
Oh, part of what the hot dogs themselves, obviously very, very important, but all of the places on that list also had a community feel that just felt so specific to where you were. The hot dogs that they served were important to the people that were eating them. And like, you don't get that along with a lot of other horrific things, you don't get that at a local food chain. Like it's, I think about like one of the hot dogs I've really been evangelizing about recently that I think was in the book was it's a vegetarian hot dog that's served at a bar in my neighborhood, and people love the hot dogs. They are delicious, but half of it is like you go and you meet up with your friend and you catch up and you eat this really good hot dog. And I think like the as lonely a dish as it could be, I everywhere that I recommended, I felt like didn't just have like a solid hot dog. It also had a feeling of community and that like it mattered in the place that it existed, which I think is really special.
Okay, yes. Speaking of vegetarian dogs, I wanted to ask you about vegan and vegetarian hot dogs and if they've gotten any better than they used to be.
I wouldn't consider myself an authority on vegan dogs. I would say in process. I think even in the last couple of years, there have been, like, it is way more common. I mean, and I live in Southern California, so usually there is a solid vegetarian or vegan dog option. But some places still not. I feel like a lot of people associate, vegan and vegetarian hot dogs with the smart dogs. Those are genuinely not good. There's no way around it. But I think from place to place, what I'm hoping is, I've yet to see a Beyond hot dog. I'm hoping that is somewhere that we can get to, that there's just like a go-to, because, part of why people get frustrated with the smart dogs is theoretically part of the hot dog appeal is you can go to the grocery store and get 12 of them for pretty cheap. And there's not quite as far as I know, a national solid vegetarian or vegan option that as a hot dog consumer would be so awesome, because the smart dogs are genuinely quite challenging.
In the intro to the book, you say, think about how you feel about hot dogs right now and let me know how you feel at the end. If it's exactly the same, I promise I won't write another one of these things. So you touched on this a little earlier, but what did you hope people would think or feel or do after reading this book, after getting this tour of our country through the lens of hot dogs?
A pretty modest goal, what I hoped, because what this journey did accomplish for me is to be more mindful about my own consumption, because there was so much that I didn't understand about, particularly about meatpacking and production. And if I am going to continue to eat meat, what is a more ethical way for me to do so? And so that is what I hope. And as I've talked with people who, and also I really have been overwhelmed and appreciated vegetarian and vegan support of this book, because I was like, you guys really don't have to. I get it, but it's been really cool, and I've gotten a lot of really great recommendations as well. But yeah, I think it's, for me, it's like there are inevitabilities that make it really, really difficult to avoid things like the hot dog. If you're in if you're poor, if you're strapped for cash, if whatever it is, the hot dog is going to be there for you. How can you find a way to interact with that reality in a way that feels better, in a way that is better for others? And so that's one thing. And then the other thing is, I just really am interested in symbols that are not the symbols that people are used to seeing as such, because the hot dog is considered, it's so universal, but it's also kind of considered low class. And I was really interested in interrogating why that is, and just have a better understanding of this symbol that I objectively do love. And now I feel like I love it in a different way.
I was thinking that what I could ask you about is hot dogs. What do you like about hot dogs?
Well, what I like about hot dogs is that hot dogs are very yummy, because if you put ketchup on it, chef's kiss. But to me, mustard on hot dogs is a little spicy. The bun, I think it's a little too bready for me, but like I don't really like to eat the extras, so I just leave it behind. But then the inside of the hot dog, I would describe it like same as a sausage, except a little more flavor in it and a little yummier. Mm-hmm. The flavor is kind of like oil and sauce mixed together. It's very meaty in a good way.
What You're Eating is produced by Nathan Dalton and foodprint.org, which is a project of the Grace Communications Foundation. Special thanks to Jamie Loftus. You can find us at www.foodprint.org, where we have this podcast as well as articles, reports, a food label guide, and lots of information about how to eat less meat, but better meat, or no meat at all.